Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we explore different musicians and their music throughout history. And today, in our very first episode, we're going to talk about the British composer Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was born on the 15th of August, 1875 in London, England. His mother's name was Alice, she was also born in England, and his father's name was Daniel, who was born in Sierra Leone. Now, for some of you who don't know where Sierra Leone is, it's a country on the west coast of Africa. It shares borders with Liberia and Guinea, and it's really well known for producing a lot of valuable materials such as diamonds, gold, and titanium. Unfortunately though, Samuel's dad moved back to Sierra Leone before Samuel was born. They never met, and history shows us that actually Samuel's dad might not have known that Alice was pregnant with Samuel before he left. Things weren't always great for Samuel growing up. There weren't too many people born of mixed heritage in London at that time, so you can imagine Samuel might have got certain looks when he was walking down the street with his mother, for example. He suffered from racism, and he even once had his hair set on fire. As hard as it must have been for someone like Samuel growing up in London at that time, he had an outlet. His grandfather taught him how to play the violin, and he eventually won a scholarship to study at the Royal College of Music, becoming one of the first black students the Royal College ever had. While he was there, he studied composition, and he was a really good student. And actually, we still have a report card from 1892 which tells us that his teacher thought Samuel was one of his cleverest pupils. He also went to school with a couple of other really famous composers, someone called Gustav Holst, who you might have heard of, who composed The Planets, and Ralph Vaughan Williams, who's also a really well-known British composer. So Samuel started to win composing competitions, and he became very well known in England and actually also in America. He got a big break when the composer Edward Elgar put his name forward to write some music for a festival. And in 1898, when he was 22 years old, he started to write one of his most famous pieces called Hiawatha's Wedding Feast. Something really interesting about Samuel was that he was very connected to his Sierra Leonean roots and his African roots as well. He attended the first ever Pan-African conference in 1900, and he met people like the African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar and the activist W.E.B. Du Bois. A few years after that, in 1904, he was actually invited to the White House to meet President Theodore Roosevelt. It's really important to remember that at that time America was segregated, which meant that black people weren't able to do many things that white people were able to do. For example, black people weren't even allowed to drink at the same water fountains as white people. The fact that Samuel was invited to go and meet the president was actually a very big deal. He visited America 3 times, and he even had schools named after him. In addition to that, he was even made a Knight Official of the Liberian Humane Order of African Redemption, which came to him after he wrote a hymn to celebrate Liberian independence. But how do you think someone like Samuel would have felt after achieving all of these different things while he was still so young? Perhaps if Samuel was around in 2021, he'd be someone who'd be on many podcasts. Maybe he'd be on CNN, BBC News, talking about issues surrounding identity and racism, many things that we've had to confront, especially in the last year. His connection to his African roots really came out in the music that he composed. Some of his most famous pieces are a collection called 24 Negro Melodies, which include the song called Deep River, which perhaps many of you have already heard. It's been performed and recorded many times across the world. Unfortunately, Samuel died when he was only 37 years old, but he left a lot of amazing music, and he's now looked at as one of the greatest black British composers of the 20th century. After everything he achieved, how on earth do you honour someone like that? Well, there is a portrait of him at the Royal College of Music. And in England, there are many different ways to honour people. And he was given... In fact, when he died, there was a memorial concert held at the Royal Albert Hall. and there were performances of Hiawatha every year from 1924 all the way up to the start of the Second World War in 1939. He and his music was loved all over the world, and there was even a performance of the Song of Hiawatha in Beijing in 1929. To honour his legacy, there's a thing called a blue plaque, which we have in England, which is often put in a public place to commemorate a famous person or place. And Samuel became the first black person to have one. If you're ever in Selhurst, which is a place in South London, you can go and see the plaque to this very day. It's on his house and it reads, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, 1875 to 1912, composer of the Song of Hiawatha, lived here. So now you've learned a bit about Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's life, I have a few questions for you.
Question?
Why do you think we don't study his music or don't hear about him as much as other composers like Mozart or Wagner or John Williams? Question number 2. He was given the nickname the African Mahler. Mahler was also a really famous composer. What do you think about giving him the nickname the African Mahler? Question number 3. Have a listen to the piece Deep River. How does that piece make you feel? Question number 3. I said earlier that there weren't very many people who looked like Samuel in London at the time that he was born. How do you think it felt for him to be living in London at that time and to be someone who many people might have seen as being different? Have you ever felt like you're really different to the people around you? How does that make you feel? Before we go, I have a fun fact for you.
Tell me something good.
Did you know that Samuel had 2 children? His son was called Hiawatha, and his daughter, her name was Gwendolyn, but she became known as Avril, and she also became quite a famous composer herself. Thank you for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you've learned something as well. Before I go, just want to give a couple of shout outs. Thank you to Rachel Huggins, Evie Jagdiv Powell, Tim Clamp from Reek Valley Academy, and Jaden de Guzman. Thank you for your help and for your input for helping to get this episode done. So until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves, listen to some great music. Peace.